Hey there. Uh, Today I wanted to discuss my thoughts and response to a blog post by Ice Mountain Fire. You can find her blog on WordPress. It's just icemountainfire.wordpress.com. And it's been a while since she's posted, but it's a really, really good blog. I would certainly recommend reading it. She has a very valuable perspective and makes some really good points. She's coming mostly from a lesbian feminist perspective. And that's kind of part of what I wanted to touch on today was her most recent post, which is actually from like almost a year ago. Well, it's from like August of 2017, so fairly recent in rad fem time. Time kind of becomes irrelevant once you start getting onto this plane of like thinking outside of patriarchy. So anyway, I've read some of her older stuff before and I liked it. And I guess I hadn't really bothered to read some of her more recent stuff until, well, just the other day. But this post is entitled "The Invisible Male of Matre-Patriarchy," a radical lesbian reading of Heidi Gottner Abbott-Droth. She's responding to this German, I assume German author, and what this German author has put forward, what is generally in this blog post referred to as mother worship, and that I will refer to as mother worship. Mother worship being part of building a female community, of building a matriarchy, or I don't even like to say matriarchy because there might be problems even with that word and the way it's even conceptualized. So I'll just say like female community, female only community, right? So this is my sort of response to Ice Mountain Fire's response to Heidi's writings. So, all right, where do I start? I mean, I guess to summarize, it's a very long blog post and it's very detailed. She basically, specifically as a lesbian, she explains her concern about mother worship culture. It's specifically something that she'll see a lot of when women are exploring or discussing the ideas of matriarchy, in observing supposedly matriarchal societies, which Ice Mountain Fire actually refers to as matre-patriarchal societies, which I think is an appropriate term because it basically is saying, well, I don't know, is it really matriarchy? Like, is matriarchy even a thing we should be aiming for? What we're observing is patriarchy that is being somewhat kept in check to some degrees, but it's still women living with men. It's still women who are freer than like women who are just in outright patriarchy to some degrees, but they're not completely free still because men are still there, right? Men are still there, and if we understand men as the parasites they are, anytime men are around, they are going to impede on our freedom. They are going to overtly or covertly, through more underhanded tactics, interfere with our freedom. So anytime men are present in any of these communities, you really can't say like that you're observing what free women would actually be like. So matre-patriarchy is a term that Ice Mountain Fire uses in her blog to refer to this, as far as what I've come to understand what that term means, is that she's basically saying it's still patriarchy, but it's just less developed, or that there's still female influences. It's not full-blown patriarchy is basically what that term means. It means not full-blown patriarchy. So the point of her blog is that the point of this post that she has written is to express her concern and objection to what we are referring to as mother worship, which is a culture or a spirituality or a mentality, a value system basically, that places motherhood up really high, as the utmost important thing, or that women who are mothers should be granted a higher status than non-mothers. basically turns motherhood into like a god or demigod type status, or a godly type status or position in the community. And she makes a really strong case for why this is not good, because it would cause lesbians and women who don't have children for whatever reason to become second-class citizens. So she's concerned about hierarchy, understandably so. And I would have to agree with her, that there is definitely that potential for hierarchy to happen once you start worshiping, which I don't even honestly think worship is something that women would do in a society that is 100% where women are liberated. I don't think worship is something that women really do. I think women are good at valuing and loving things as ordinary things, which is like what Mary Daly talks a lot about, trivial things, which are ordinary things, or what she says, extraordinary, meaning it's actually very, very ordinary, but is still incredibly valuable and important. That women don't have this dichotomy naturally in our heads. That's a male construction, right? So worship is something that necessitates that dichotomous divide between the sacred and the not sacred, right? The sacred and the ordinary, the divine and the, I don't know, human or subhuman or whatever, ranking things again, it is hierarchical thinking. And I don't think that women who are truly free of patriarchal thinking would ever worship in that way. We might still have rituals to sort of like get in certain types of like states of mind, or to channel energy or whatever, to manifest things, to connect with things. But it's not worship. That's a very different thing. Worship is a very hierarchical thing. So obviously mother worship is inherently hierarchical in the way it's even constructed. Actually, it's a really interesting post for many other reasons as well. Ice Mountain Fire, she kind of goes into details about like different female goddesses and how they've been hijacked by patriarchy and turned into mothers and rape victims, and worshipped for being token torturers, and worshipped for being mothers, and worshipped for being sex slaves and whatever, instead of worship for what they actually were originally. When you dig deep enough into the history of those goddesses, that they actually originally represented elemental forces of their own accord. And obviously that makes sense, knowing what we know about men, knowing what we know about patriarchy, knowing what we know about their parasitic construction of the world and their parasitic view of women. So I completely understand and agree with Ice Mountain Fire in her concerns and objections to mother worship. I would have to add to what she's said, because I think that there's an aspect of mother worship that she maybe hasn't considered. And so what I would add to what she's written is that the bigger concern I would have, and the bigger problem I see with mother worship, is that it's not good for women at large, women who are mothers or potential mothers. It's not good for women, because here's the thing, mother worship, I think it's designed to trick women, right? It's designed to trick women into being mothers. I think that's the bigger problem with mother worship. It's not honest. It pulls the wool over women's eyes. And I think particularly within a Western cultural, patriarchal context, talking about Western groups of mothers getting together and, trying to bolster, a sense of status for mothers. What's going on with mother worship is that it's overcompensating for the context of patriarchy, which completely diminishes and invisibilizes the labor involved with pregnancy, birth, nursing, and rearing children, and all the other types of work that go along with all the work that women do. That's invisibilized and diminished. is that Western women are coming from that as a base. That's the first part, right? The mother worship that they try and develop on top of that is overcompensatory. It's a response to the diminished role of the mother within patriarchy. Now, yeah, patriarchy, men and their shit system is shit and it's stupid, but it's not stupid enough to completely diminish women, mothers completely, because they understand that that's at the core of it, right? That the parasites are literally reproductively dependent on female bodies to keep reproducing them. So they're not so stupid as to completely throw all mothers into the trash. They still, if they just give mothers a little pat on the back here and there every once in a while, you know, and it's the reason why I've chosen not to have kids, like, because it's a fucking trap and it's a nightmare. And there's a lot of aspects of motherhood that I think, yes, are naturally difficult and painful and require a certain type of sacrifice and are dangerous and risky. Yes, there are a lot about motherhood that are naturally that way. But I think, in addition to that, patriarchy turns motherhood into a prison. It turns it into a trap. It turns it into a fucking hell, an inescapable hell. Patriarchy makes it even worse, you know, by isolating mothers, by medicalizing pregnancy, by separating, breaking bonds between mothers and daughters from very early ages in various ways, and you know, obviously medical intervention is basically torture. We know that. So it just turns it into a hell, and then erases it and invisibilizes it. So this is what women in Western patriarchy are dealing with first. That's the source right there. Mother worship, or, you know, the parts of Western patriarchy that put mothers up on a slightly higher pedestal than non-mothers, is really the afterthought. It's the reaction to all of that shit. So they give mothers just enough little, like, pat on the back, little crumb here to keep women feeling like they have just enough value in the mother and sexually reproductive work that they're doing, because it is work. So that's the trap, right? That's the fucking trap. And mother worship doesn't do anything to actually fix that problem. It just overcompensates and reacts to it by saying, oh, you're a goddess, you're a queen mother, you're a mother bear, whatever. However it's conceptualized, it's there to help bolster against the reality that mothers are actually garbage, because women are garbage. And even the women who are doing the most important work for patriarchy, which is producing more people so patriarchy can keep this massive shit show going, even they're still treated like they're still garbage, you know. They're just slightly less garbage than non-mother women, like. And yeah, is it annoying when mothers hold themselves superior to non-mother women, or that there's like these other types of statuses that they might enjoy as mothers for the sacrifice that they made or whatever? Yeah, no, that's all there too, but I don't see how you can, like, I mean, I feel like that's so secondary to, like, the massive bullshit that mothers suffer under patriarchy. I don't want women to have to do that or go through that. I don't want women to fall for that trap. So, bringing that back over to the female community. When I say female community, I imagine female only. Like, and maybe I haven't made that clear in previous discussions, but that's exactly what I'm envisioning, is literally only women and girls. Men live on the periphery, or they're not anywhere near us at all. This, you know, idea of, like, how we want our female community to be. Yeah, I would say we should not have mother worship because it's dishonest to women. And I don't think women should be walking into motherhood with the wool pulled over their eyes in either way, you know? So mother worship is really just the other side of the coin. It's a patriarchal necessity to compensate for the the actual shit status that mothers hold in society. You know, it's like, and you see that in general with women in general, that we like kind of, we want to pat ourselves in the back to kind of bolster ourselves up to like compensate for the low self-esteem that we have from just living under patriarchy in general, you know. And you see this a lot when women, we call ourselves queens, we call ourselves boss, we call ourselves witch, you know, we call ourselves goddess, you know. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, no, we are not. We're not the boss, obviously, you know. We're not queens. We're fucking subjects. We're fucking subjugated. Like, so mother worship in that same sense, it's this overcompensatory thing that sort of appeals to self-delusion, you know. It doesn't deal with the reality of motherhood. Not, it doesn't deal with the natural challenges of motherhood, and it definitely doesn't deal with the artificial, patriarchally created challenges and hellhole that patriarchy makes motherhood. So it just pulls another layer of wool over women's eyes. So in a female community, mother worship would continue to do that. If we were to have that, it would continue to trick women into being mothers that might not otherwise want to be. And I do think that if I do think that motherhood within the context of the female community would not be a fucking nightmare. I don't think it would be a nightmare. You know, I think that we can value motherhood, we can value it just like we value other types of work and important things that we do to maintain and strengthen our community, you know. And I feel like that the mother worship thing, it wouldn't even be necessary if women were living in a community where they felt that the work that they were doing in literally creating the subsequent generation with their bodies, literally, you know, raising and teaching, and, you know, that first of all, they would feel valued enough that you wouldn't have to have this overcompensatory mother worship shit going on. They would feel like equally valued members of the community, and they would feel like the work that they're doing is being seen and acknowledged and valued, right? They don't feel invisible. Additionally, I think that the labor involved in raising kids is a labor that should be shared by everyone in the community. It should. Like, if we have decided we have a community that we want to build, and if we decide that it's important for us to have subsequent generations, then there's no way around it. Like, we have to raise kids. Like, that's work that needs to be done. Just like if we decide we want to eat in a month or two, you know, if we want to have food next season, we got to do the work of growing food now. Like, that's just, it's like, it's just this practical circumstance you can't get around. Understandably, not all women will want to have children themselves or do the work of raising, do the main work of raising kids. But I think every single member in our community should be involved in teaching, interacting, you know, with children and caring for children. You know, that should be something that is shared by the community, by everyone, because children aren't really this sole propriety of the mothers that they're born from. You know, children aren't private property. They belong to everyone and no one, really, you know. So the child belongs to themselves, but they're a valuable member of the community and will be the future of the community. So why wouldn't every member of that community be invested in taking care of this kid and raising them, you know? Like, so anyway, I understand some women are really, really put off with the idea of kids, but I feel like that's, again, that's a reaction to the patriarchal version of motherhood and daughterhood, right? I like react to our own childhood being so terrible sometimes. Or, look, I know that's definitely the case for me. But like, so that's my point, is that the very way that motherhood is even structured or conceptualized really has the potential to be something good and valued, but not, again, not upheld as the most important or superior to other types of work that we're all doing to keep the community going, to keep it stable and strong. That's all, again, equally valued. We don't want to create a class of people who are superior for being mothers, but there are certain types of tasks that bring certain burdens that do need to be shared by everyone. Okay, raising the next generation is a burden that needs to be shared by everyone. Of course, we're going to have women who are good at certain things, better at certain things, and we can acknowledge that this is good. It doesn't make them superior to everyone else. It just means you're good at this stuff. I feel like daughters of a female community would not be the terrible things that children can be under patriarchy. The whole experience of children and motherhood and raising children and taking care and teaching children, I think the whole way that even happens would be very different under the context of a female-only community that has liberated itself of its own patriarchal patterns and values, And here's the question I guess I would have to those women who say that they abhor children and like don't want anything to do with children or interacting with children or caring for children. I'd say, well, do you want the subsequent generations of your community to have someone like you? Like what is it that you value and bring to the table as your unique self? And why wouldn't you want that to be a part of the next generation? So simply by interacting with children, socializing with them, teaching them things, caring for them in various ways, you're leaving an impression of yourself on that child. Whether they are literally your child from your own body or not, whether they're just like a neighbor or a niece or whatever, you're imprinting yourself on that girl. And that's something she will carry with her. The values, the ideas, the skills that you teach her, she's going to carry that over into the next generation. That right there is motherhood in that sense, right? It's legacy, right? So maybe it's not about motherhood, but about legacy, right? The legacy of like what our community is, how it functions, what it's for, why we do it the way we do it, and the literal skills involved that allow that community to be and to thrive. Obviously, that needs to be passed down to the next generation. So, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? It just doesn't make sense to me. And maybe again, I don't know. Maybe these women who feel this way are reacting to patriarchal constructions of motherhood and childcare, that turn it into a nightmare. I don't think it would be that way if we're dealing with, first of all, dealing with only female children, because there would be no male children. You go ahead and fill in the blanks of how that's possible, but there would not be male children in these communities. They would only be female children, and all of these children would grow up in a world where they had a whole community of women, teaching them things and interacting with them and connecting with them and caring about them. Like it's just completely different from anything that any of us grew up experiencing. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but that's what I wanted to share with you. I highly recommend reading Ice Mountain Fire's blog. Again, I don't necessarily 100% agree with everything. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree. Her perspective is definitely different than mine in some ways, but there's a tremendous amount of value there in what she's saying, and I think she makes a lot of really good points, and has done a lot of really interesting research. So, yeah, icemountainfire.wordpress.com. The blog post I'm talking about is The Invisible Male of Matre-Patriarchy, right? I guess that's all I want to say about it. All right, y'all. Bye.